You've got before on the left, after on the right hand side. You can just see how on the left hand side you are really kind of hanging out on the toes quite heavily. So when you had the sensation of trying to pull this left shoulder forward, it really moved too much of your mass over the front of the foot, which when the club is moving on the way down and it wants to move in front of you, you can quite easily feel as if you're going to move too far forward and get stuck on your toes. Moving you a little bit closer to the ball on the right hand side, and if we drew a plumb line through the back of the armpit downwards, you know, in a much better position where that plumb line falls through the balls of the feet and the front of the kneecaps. Okay, so just a generally more comfortable setup to lead on to some really positive changes as we move forward in this video. So what we saw, and the big picture was, okay, working the ground up, a slight lack of rotation through the pelvis, a very high arm position at the top, and a steep shaft in transition. Now, the reason why a steep shaft in transition is very difficult is because you know, being a good player, that you can't hit a ball like this because that club head will not reach strike. So what you learn to do, that halfway down, is to push the handle outwards. That allows the club to shallow on the inside, but then when you offer this kind of like high handle, it shallows the club out late and makes it very, very difficult to deliver a face and angle of attack consistently. Whereas on the right hand side, and we'll talk through the other changes in a second, we see a slightly deeper lead arm at the top and less overextension of your rib cage. So you just look, again, way more comfortable and as if you're not going to fall towards the ball. During the downswing, we see a shaft which wants to shallow out. Absolutely fantastic. And your job from here is to make sure that you keep turning through the ball, keep turning through the shot, as opposed to trying to keep your body fairly shut. You can see your shoulders here are still closed at strike, which can be a defense mechanism if you're trying to not miss it left, for example. You're trying to push it off to the right. But actually, I would encourage you to get really rotary in your downswing, because it would actually move the low point later and again, give you more control over your club face, which we saw. So let's go to a face on, and I'll just change these videos over quickly. So a huge change from face on, and let's draw a sway line on the left hand side and a sway line on the right hand side. Now you can see when you make a backswing on the right, there is a lot of pelvis sway away from target, and again, still hanging out with the toes too much. This backswing on the left means that you now have to sway back across, whereas on the right hand side, we see a much better rotation around your spine angle. So a really nicely loaded pivot with a spine angle which will lend itself to hitting all irons better, because it will help you move in a rotation on the way down, i.e. improving your angle of attack, but also it will improve driver, because when that ball's further up in your stance, it will encourage more upstrike without you having to try to create upstrike in your downswing by leaning back. You're already in the spine angle, you can feel as if you rotate left and you're in a much better spot. Okay, so I love this difference here. I think it's absolutely incredible. What I want you to imagine is as a Swiss ball on your lead hip, try to keep the ball up against the wall, almost feel as if you can press it slightly against the wall, and it should feel as if you're actually starting to drive a little bit more pressure on that lead foot, as opposed to moving a lot of weight off of that lead foot. Okay, so I hope it all makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this session, and I will look forward to the next one. Time today, mate. It was good to catch up, and brilliant to hear that you have seen some progress over the last few weeks. Just going to run through very quickly the couple of setup changes we made. So very, very simple. Just standing a little bit further away from the ball. So if we had a plumb line through the back of the trail arm, it would fall through the front of the kneecaps and the base of the laces, whereas you're standing up a little bit more upright here, creating a little bit of a plumb line which is too deep. Okay, so we see it run through the middle of the foot rather than base of the laces, and fall through and dissect the kneecaps rather than fall in front. So very, very simple, but allows the space. Mainly because the changes you're going to make now are going to be working towards shallowing the club shaft. When the shaft gets a little bit longer, it can start to play. Sorry, when the shaft gets a little bit shallower, gave a clue away, it can start to play a little bit longer. There you go, it's been a busy day. So we just need to make sure our setup is, and our anchor point therefore, is a little bit more consistent and conducive to showing a shaft. On the left, as we work up, we can see that the hip is turning more so than it was last time, but we can see that trail arm retracting too far behind you. So the elbow, rather than fold and rotate it, it starts to pull behind, and that starts to cause some lift in the arms and a club shaft that gets across the line at the top of the swing. So we would need a little bit more rotation lower down and a better mechanics of the trail arm. On the right hand side, a little bit further away as we can see, and we already see the arms starting to fold better. So as we get to P3, the forearms are more level as opposed to your right arm being above your lead arm. Okay, so you see how the forearms are more level on this right hand side versus the right arm being more above your left arm on this lead side. So as that works up, we can see how again the trail arm and lead arm are of a similar height, as opposed to seeing the trail arm much more above the lead arm. Okay, this completely changes the weight of the club head. So now we can see the weight of the club head more behind the hands rather than the weight of the club head more in front of the hands. So it's much easier now to feel this kind of angular force as you rotate and as you work this left side out the way, and we can go through here and here. The handle therefore will work more out and down as opposed to straight downwards. And this effectively allows the club shaft to follow a much more consistent plane line as opposed to fluctuating to steep and then shallow and therefore standing up. So it's a much more effective and repeatable way to deliver the club. So huge changes. The key part is when you get in this backswing, you can feel the left shoulder pull out the way, feel the left hip pull out the way, and the handle work towards the ball. And that will just pull this club along a very consistent plane. You just need to keep turning to match it all up. Okay, hope that makes sense. Looking forward to hearing the next update, and I will speak to you very soon. Cheers. Hey Simon, hope you're okay. Thanks for your time on Saturday. It was good to get going and good to catch up. And even better to see the amount of progress you've made recently. You know, I think we're really going to have a good year next year. You're hitting it great. I think we've just got to trust how you're hitting it and keep applying ourselves in the same way every time, and we get these good outcomes. Okay, so one of the real keys that we're just going to battle with, you know, over the next few months, and a habit which would need to gradually get better, is the quality of the slide. Now, obviously when you come in and you say, I'm still struggling to get my arms deeper, it feels a bit weird when I try and get them deeper, that's always, and I mean literally always, because the pelvis is still sliding from side to side. So on this left-hand side, we can see the pelvis move slightly away from the target, nowhere near as bad as you were, but you can see how the upper half, the chest, is wanting to move towards your target, and the lower half is wanting to move away from target. Whereas on the right-hand side, we can really see how well you load into that trail hip. You know, the sway line on the right-hand side of your hip there is actually being kind of broken by your lead hip, which I actually really like. I think you are going to be in a much better place to hit either shape. You could hit draws or fades from this spot, but now we can see the center of the chest versus the center of the pelvis is in a much more favorable position. And you can actually tell that the arms do look a little bit deeper on the right hand side, whereas on the left the hands just look like they're a little higher and a bit closer to the camera. And this kind of, it's almost like a reverse pivot in a way, will often cause slightly more unfavorable driving, a slightly steeper transition, because again the chest is wanting to move first. That can cause the hands to kick outwards, and obviously we're going to get some problems there. But now on the right hand side, we can see how you can do a much better job of keeping the chest and the pelvis more synced up, and it should deliver a much more consistent draw shape. Not saying a draw is the absolute dream, but I think for you and the way you move it and you know, grip style, etc., I think it would really, really help. So outside of that, just a slightly stronger grip in that lead hand, and you're absolutely good to go. Hey Simon, hope you're well. Thanks for your time on Saturday. It was good to catch up as always, and really pleased to hear that you feel as if you're making some good progress. You've got before where you started on the left hand side versus where we are now on this right hand side, and you can just see how the change in setup is fantastic. Wrong line. So right shoulder just outside right ankle, and left shoulder just outside left ankle. So in a great postural position. You can just see how the grip on the left is a little bit weak, and the shoulders almost look twisted, don't they? They look kind of like twisted and open. But on the right, you just look absolutely solid. And this was towards the end of the session on Saturday, just FYI. On the right, as we move back, we are going to see you rotate around your center point much better. So your lead hip doesn't really leave that line there, versus the right hand side. We obviously had an awful lot more sway and that lead shoulder trying to move down more. I also want you to notice the quality of the right arm position. So you can still see the right arm in front of the chest versus the right arm behind or to the side of the chest. This inevitably means that you're going to see more sideways on the way down and a head position which would eventually start to lean back. And this is why the ball striking was so difficult for you, because you're relying on your tip, your side to side movement, whereas on the right hand side you can really start to see a better rotation around to your left hand side, not lifting the head back and up anywhere near as much, and you just look more kind of lower, more squatted in a good way to create a bit more power. And one of my favourite, very, very subtle things is those hands are at the same spot there, and we see more sharpening on the right, less sharpening on the left. We also see the right foot staying flatter versus the right foot firing too early. So your really big key is to continue to work on this right kind of hip moving back and around, and therefore keeping you against your sway line on that right hand side. That spine angle is absolutely fantastic. The grip obviously plays a vital role in this, because you're feeling more over the ball, and therefore if the grip was on the weaker side still and you're feeling more on top of it, you would maybe feel as if you're going to spin it off to the right hand side, but now you just feel as if you're going to draw it. Okay, so amazing work, love the progress, and I cannot wait to see how you get on this year.